It's Nick from A Longer Life here, and today I am chatting with Dr. Alessandra Zonari from OneSkin, co-founder and CSO at OneSkin, to talk about an exciting new development in their product lineup, OS01 Hair. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining me.
Yeah. Hi, Nick. Hi, everyone. So nice to be here again. I'm excited to talk about this new innovation that we're launching today as the day we are recording this conversation.
Yeah, that's fun. I was saying just before we started chatting how much I like being on the cutting edge and being in the know. And in fact, I was fortunate enough to visit the OneSkin labs back in July 2024. And you did let me know about a few things that you're working on that you were soon to release. And I can't remember. I don't think OS01 hair was one of them at the time, but here it comes. You've developed this new product. You're clearly bringing it to market again with the OS01 peptide, and it's going to sit in there with all the amazing other products you've got this peptide in. One that's particularly benefited my skin, and also you've made incredible sunscreen. So it's really a great addition, I think, to the product lineup. And I wanted to start off by asking you the question, because clearly, if you're releasing the OS01 peptide in a hair product, cellular senescence must have something really important to do with hair loss. Introduce us to that relationship.
Yes, of course. So the reason why we start digging into scalp and hair loss was because we start to realize that cellular senescence plays a role on hair thinning and hair loss. So just a remember, cellular senescence is those damaged cells that are supposed to die. They don't die, and they accumulate with aging, and they secrete inflammation that deteriorate the surrounding tissue. We have been studying cellular senescence on the skin since 2016. And then after developing the line of the products that we have so far, we have seen a lot of research coming showing that senescent cells also accumulate on the hair follicle. So research shows that on aged hair follicles compared to a young hair follicle, you have accumulation of senescent cells. And even on men that have pattern balding, like areas that are already losing hair, they collected hair follicles from that area and compared with cells from areas that you have a lot of hair growth, and the hair follicle cells from the area that is losing hair has more senescent cells in the pool. So there is the research is showing that senescent cells are accumulating on hair follicle and is contributing to the hair thinning and loss. And because OS1 peptide is targeting this accumulation of senescent cells, is able to reduce the inflammation secreted from these cells, we thought would be interesting to start testing and analyzing if it would have some benefits if applied in the scalp. And the scalp is a tissue, it's a skin tissue. So it makes sense, it's adjacent to the skin. So it made a lot of sense for us to explore that area and to try to address this other pain that comes with us with aging, that's the hair thinning and hair loss.
Great, thank you. And you actually jumped into my follow-up question, which was citing the research that you have. And in terms of your release information, you've got a blog coming out, you got some supporting documentation. In there, you reference a number of scientific studies, which I noticed were fairly new in terms of this relationship between hair follicles, their growth phases, and cellular senescence. So let's double click on that and go just go a
Mhm.
layer deeper, so to speak,
Yeah,
in terms
yeah.
of the cellular senescence and its role in hair thinning and loss.
Yeah. So as I was saying, I mean, a lot of this research is new, and that's why, when the papers start to come out, intrigued us on doing our own research about it. And those research, as I was saying, was showing this correlation on follicles that are having that the hair cycle is going more into this thinning phase where you're losing the hair. They accumulate more of the senescent cells, and a lot of times this can also be induced by stress hormones. And this was also interesting for us to start learning from the literature that stress hormones that are released when we are under stress conditions, one of them is corticotropin, sorry, CRH. Those hormones that we release when we are undergoing stress periods of time, they can induce cellular senescence on hair follicle cells. So we started our investigation by culturing hair follicle cells in our lab, seeing how they can be induced to become senescent cells by hormones, and testing if our peptide would reduce this accumulation of the formation of senescent cells. And indeed, we saw a reduction of 20% of the senescent cells formation, which in a reduction of over 30% on release of inflammatory cytokines, which was like intriguing for us and encouraging for us to start developing a formula that will deliver the OS1 peptide to the scalp and see what the benefits of that would come on the hair.
Right. Okay. And so I've been to your laboratory, and it's very impressive. It's very fun to go. In fact, I brought my son along, and he had lots of beautiful questions, and there was so much science happening there. And clearly, this is where you've done the work you've just mentioned. So, in terms of those in-house analyses that you did as the preliminary work for this, were you looking specifically at scalp tissue or at hair follicles directly in the laboratory?
Yeah, so we used two models. One of them is hair follicle cells that are isolated from the hair follicle. So you have dermal papilla fibroblast, and you have another cell that the name is more complicated, but the acronym is ORSCs. So these are the cells that stays around the hair follicle, and they are responsible to producing the hair. So we tested on cells that were isolated from hair follicle, and you can purchase these from different companies. And then we induced cellular senescence on those cells. But we partner with a dermatologist, and we received scalp tissue, mainly coming from skin lift, like facelift. So sometimes you have like the line here of leftover of skin with some hair follicles. We received that in our lab, and we were able to isolate each hair follicle. And you can keep this for 7 days in a petri dish, and you can still continue seeing the hair growth happening in the petri dish. And we were able to see that you can like reduce this hair growth with some hormones, and we can measure the hair growth when we were treating with the OS1 hair and with the final formula that we developed. So we use these two models of the cell lines and also the full hair follicle to test our peptides, see if it was reducing senescence markers, reducing inflammation, and that all that data encouraged us to run a clinical study where we then could we could then actually test in humans if applying that product daily would improve like the hair growth.
Great. And we're going to get to that because there's some interesting data in that. And I'm making myself a guinea pig, of course. So we're going to have some
I
fun
can't
with
wait
that one.
to hear your
Of
how you
course.
feel like about
That's what
it.
everybody likes when Nick
Yeah.
turns himself into the guinea pig. Yeah, I enjoy that. So, like you've mentioned hormones a few times, and that's really important here because, particularly in male pattern baldness, we know that it's a hormone-driven process. You also, I think, were mentioning stress hormones in your description there, and that brings me to thinking about how existing hair loss solutions tend to target those hormonal driven problems, particularly DHT. That's the one we hear a lot about, particularly when we're advertised to as men who might be losing our hair as we age. So let's just like make it clear what that hormone relationship is. What is DHT? Why do these hormones drive hair loss? You mentioned stress before, but there's another one. There's another pattern in there that we need to talk about.
So DHT is the main hormone, is a derivative of testosterone, is the main driver on men's and in some women's to the androgenic alopecia, to this pattern of balding. And it usually happens because some people, they are more sensitive to these hormones. They either have more receptor on their cells or these hormones on the scalp tissue, they respond more in a more sensitive way compared to other people. And this is something that comes genetically. And what we have seen in the literature is that the presence of this DHT on the scalp can induce cellular senescence, but it's not that our peptide can modulate the DHT. So whoever is suffering from alopecia that is being caused by this dysfunctional on DHT and responses to DHT, there are some alternatives, some ways of treating. The main ones are finasteride, that's a blocker of DHT, or minoxidil that stimulates blood flow on the scalp. And especially finasteride, that's really like blocking the DHT, is really targeting one of the symptoms and one of the causes of that pattern, both pattern. It's different of what our OS1 peptide is doing and can be complementary to our peptide, because our peptide is going at the cellular level to the senescence that are being accumulated, either due to because you are sensitive to DHT or because of aging or stress that you are undergoing, and is helping to reduce the cellular senescence, which creates a better environment for the function of the hair follicle cells. The OS1 peptide then is targeting these root causes of the aging at the cellular level in the hair follicle, but is not fixing if you're sensitive to DHT. So either like and especially when you're sensitive to DHT and you're undergoing androgenic alopecia, especially in men, when you are on that phase that you already completely lost your hair follicles, it's very hard to reverse that fully hair loss. What we have been seeing that early stages, when you're starting to be affected by that, there is accumulation of senescent cells. Our peptide can help there, because the senescent cells that are being induced by that disruption from the hormones is also leading to an acceleration of the ending of this growth cycle phase, the anagen phase. So our product we see as helping a lot on hair thinning and hair growth, especially in a preventative way. When you have like long patterns of androgenic alopecia that is related with the DHT dysfunction, you will need more than OS1 hair to really cure, to really reverse that problem. It goes beyond that, but we see that is very complementary approaches. And we did see even on our clinical study that men react super well to the OS1 hair. In that case, they were not using either minoxidil or finasteride, but they are different mechanisms, and we really need to address what is causing that hair loss that the person is having, in which stage of the hair loss they are at that moment, and how they can see the benefits of the OS1 hair.
Great, thank you. So just to help summarize some of that, because there's a lot in there that we would like to unpack and just make sure it's super clear, is that there are multiple things that drive hair thinning, loss, balding as we age. In particular, for men, that can be a hormone-driven male pattern baldness, which I believe you were referring to as an androgenic
alopecia.
Androgenic alopecia, that's the word, thank you. And when we have that, we're not going to be able to turn back the clock with a senescent cell targeting peptide like OS01 and OS01 hair, but it plays a complementary role to the DHT blocking pharmaceutical options, because there is also cellular senescence happening in the process of the hair that they are retaining, in that there will already be gathering senescent cells in the hair follicles and the surrounding tissues that will be thinning the hair that they already do have. And you mentioned something really important, that we have hair that our hair follicles go through growth cycles. And I actually didn't know this until I dove into the research for this interview, in that our hair is actually cyclical. Our hair follicles are cyclical. Can you explain just a little bit about that general cycle and how it relates to the cellular senescence slowing down or halting that actual growth or regeneration cycle?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we undergo cycles of hair growth. So mainly it's there are three stages on the hair growth. The anagen phase is the phase where the hair is growing, and it lasts longer. It lasts from 2 to 7 years, and it's mainly 80 to 90% of your hair is undergoing that phase. So that said, that means that depending on each person, every 2 to 7 years, you renew the hair that you have on your scalp. So this hair here, I don't have the same hair since I was young. It was already like changed like 2 or 3 times, depending on the cycle. So the anagen phase is that phase that the hair is growing. And naturally, or depending on, it can be accelerated due to some circumstances, the hair growth goes to the catagen phase, which is a resting phase where the hair stops growing. And then after that, it goes to telogen phase, which the hair completely sheds out and it will be removed from your scalp. So mainly in a healthy person, 90% of our hair is on this growth phase, and eventually some of the hairs are going through catagen and then telogen phase, and we are renewing some of the old hairs and being replaced to young hairs. What happens with like aging process and accumulation of senescent cells is that it's instead of this anagen phase lasting like 7 years, it can be driving this to already go to the catagen phase and telogen phase, and then you lose that hair. That's also why some people cannot grow their hair super long. They start losing, and their hair is kind of like, oh, my hair never. I try to get it long, but it does not get super long. It's because you're losing the hair before the hair gets too long. So this is a natural cycle that happens, but when there is dysregulation, dysfunction, that you're driving more towards catagen and anagen too early, is where you start to feel your hair losing volume, the hair thinning, or eventually like completely disrupting and losing, creating like baldness on your scalp.
Great, thank you. And we can see how important having that cyclical pattern be healthy and robust is for having good-looking hair. And let's be
Yeah,
honest, we would all like good-looking hair.
viola. Yeah,
I
and
have
with the
several of
age,
my friends are very jealous of my hair because they're losing their hair because
yeah,
we're all in our late 30s.
usually with aging, like everyone like loses like the volume of hair that you have when you're 67, even if you're not like undergoing any condition of hair loss, you start losing, and it's kind of nice like to have like more fuller, more thick hairs. The OS1 peptide can really help on increasing the length of this anagen phase to have more hair. Yeah.
Great. So androgen growth phase, this is what we want to stimulate, have it be robust. And this is why we're having the very interesting early stage results around hair feeling thicker and fuller and reversing the thinning and potentially loss of hair. And you have run a 6 month now study with a third party looking over just looking at a number of parameters in terms of the hair. The mean distance between follicles, the sum of hair widths. There's a lot of, I see anagen hairs is in here. I'm looking at some results that you've just sent over, and there is some particularly interesting results, particularly in men. Now, this is a relatively small study. It's early stages. This hasn't been peer reviewed or published yet, but this is often where longevity technology is, right? This is
Yeah,
exactly the
we
type
we
of thing we
we are
want to pay
getting
attention
excited
to.
to write the paper and submit the data soon. It's just fresh new data.
Yeah, exactly. So we're really privileged that you're going to share some of that with us. And I thought, why don't we focus just on a few key results? In particular, I was interested in, because even at your 3 month data, there was a clear signal in the relatively small number of men that were in the study. I think there was 7, that they seemed to be having a fairly strong response. And I was curious why you thought that was the case at a high level.
Yeah, so I mean, men, especially men that are like going under hair thinning and probably has some dysfunction with the DHT, they're probably already accumulating more of the senescent cells compared to the female that joined the study. And that's why they probably have this fast response as well, this strong response that we ended seeing after 6 months in both cohorts being extremely similar and strong. And we were able to see that the women in the study respond well, and they had improvements of, in average, 40% in different parameters, and the men also had similar great response. Just to summarize, just to explain a little bit more of this study, this was done by a third party. It was recruited healthy participants that perceive their hair is thinning or losing. So they were not diagnostic with any condition of androgenic alopecia or any condition that is related to hair loss, but they are really already have some areas that they see their hair thinning, they're experiencing shedding. So this was the type of participants that were enrolled on the study. And we used an instrument called hair metrics that can take like a close-up picture on a certain area of your scalp. We mark that area of the scalp, so we follow up and we take a picture exactly on the same location. And this machine is able to measure the thickness of the hair, the distance between each hair follicle, if there is any new hair coming out, the phase. So it's a very sophisticated machine that can more than just your perception that you're feeling that your hair is growing again. It's giving us instrumental data and numbers of what that growth was being
Right.
shown.
That's things like hair counts per centimeter
Yes.
squared, the sum of the hair widths, the follicular units per centimeter squared, the anagen hairs per centimeter squared, and the interfollicular mean distance. So these are some technical terms that are really referring to how much hair is growing, how healthy and dense is that hair.
Yes, exactly. And then what we saw is that after like 3 months, there was already improvements on around 20% on a lot of these metrics. And then after 6 months, this improvement almost doubled. Like we go to the percentage of improvement in hair count going to 40%, 40% in all the participants and 36.68 if we just look to the main audience. And this was on above 80% of the total participants, and in the men was 100% of the men they saw this improvement on the hair count, which for us was very it's a very strong data. We have been comparing looking in the literature to data from clinical study that was run with other drugs and molecules, and we are on par or even better on these metrics. It's interesting because you don't find that much. Now there's a lot of hair scalp serums coming out into the cosmetics, and a lot of them, they do consumer studies, perception, but it's rare to find those that really measure the impact. So we are very satisfied with this improvement of 40%, around 40% in several of these metrics.
Yeah, it's great results, and we'll be able to share some more of them in a written form with whatever permission you're willing to grant. But I think that the most important thing that we're seeing here is that in terms of the hypothesis that cellular senescence is going to lead to less productive hair follicles,
Mhm.
shorter growth phases, maybe a halt of growth phase altogether, or dysfunction in it, when we add this peptide to reduce the cellular senescent burden, which you have lots of research to show that your peptide does do that, particularly in skin tissue, it's not a very far leap to say, look, this peptide is reducing cellular senescence, particularly with the lab data you referenced before. It's removing the senescent cells, it's reducing the senescent cell burden, and now we're seeing improvement in the function of the hair follicles such that it's denser, thicker, and more healthy. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a tremendous outcome.
Yes, it makes all sense with the hypothesis and each stage of the results that we were getting. So the data in the lab had encouraged us a lot to move forward with this to clinical studies, and then the results just like confirming the hypothesis. One other interesting data that I'm not sure if I shared completely with you, but we also analyze the scalp microbiome because now more and more we are learning that the scalp microbiome can influence on these stages of the hair growth. There are some bacteria that they secrete metabolites that improve the health of the hair follicle cells and they induce more hair growth, while others can create an environment that is more inflammatory. So we collected also the scalp microbiome and we sequenced the scalp microbiome before and after starting this study after 6 months. And the results was also very interesting that we balanced better the microbiome to like having more of the healthy bacteria that promote hair growth, and even like less of those that causes like dandruff or like any kind of like inflammation, irritation on your scalp. So this we don't completely assume that is coming from the OS1 peptide, but it's also the full formula. The way we created this formula, we also add some prebiotics and a lot of other antioxidant components that are helping to promote this scalp health. And we were very happy to see on the results that we're really shifting the microbiome to a more balanced and healthy state.
Great, thank you. And I've actually got the product here with me,
Yay!
as well as your little derma roller, right? So this derma roller is, as I understand it, helping to make small perforations in the tissue so that you have better absorption of the peptide serum here, right? So for
Exactly.
me, I am actually doing a lot of what you already described. So I've been focusing on the areas of my hair here, which are thinning a little bit, very common in men. I'm lucky to not have very much of it. I'm lucky to not have male pattern baldness. I think that my receding hair or thinning hair is most likely cellular senescence driven. So been using this little derma roller. I usually slick my hair all the way back and get it exposed, and been putting that derma roller over that spot. And then just taking a little bit of the peptide serum, which is really, not too bad, and just putting a little bit in there and then massaging it into the scalp, right?
That's the perfect way of doing. And this
Yeah.
formula is a water-based formula, so it does not leave your hair greasy, absorbs pretty well. For women, you can style your hair after. So we ended with a very lightweight formula that I'm very satisfied with it, easy to use. The derma roller, as you mentioned, it helps improving the absorption of the serum. It also stimulates more blood vessels, more blood circulation on the area, which is also helping the hair follicle cells to be acting on a healthier environment and stronger. So we recommend to use the derma roller to just like boost more the effects that you're looking for. And you just showed like perfectly. I'm also like, I have a little bit, and there's a lot of growing hair now. I have thinning on the same area, and I've been seeing also experience on myself the benefits of this serum. I can't wait to hear back from you. One thing that's very important is that hair growth, because the hair has these long periods of cycles, it needs consistent use, and it needs some time to you start seeing the results. It's not that you will use this week and next week you will see double hairs or like the hair stops shedding completely. It takes some time, so it really needs the commitment to be using and see more improvements. But with the continuous use, our clinical studies showed that starting with 3 months, you will have less shedding, thicker hair, more hair growth, and you will start seeing, what you will see is that you perceive that less shedding of your hair, and you start perceiving a stronger hair, a healthier scalp, like less itchy or irritated if some people are on that phase. So there are a lot of benefits that already even start showing earlier after, because we did also some beta tests and we collect data after 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and especially after 2 months, we start to have like strong responses, but it really requires constant use in the beginning.
Right. Well, I've been using it twice a day. I'm
Yay!
about 4 weeks into that self experiment. I took photos, of course, from all the different angles with my iPhone, but I also took up close images with a dermoscope. Now, it doesn't have the
Awesome.
analytics. It doesn't have the analytics that you do. Of course, that's not going to be accessible, but
Mhm.
I do have very high resolution images of my hair. I've marked where those are on my scalp. So we shall certainly see what it does for me. And given what I've seen happen with the OS1 face in the past, I am hopeful. I'm hopeful that we're
Yes.
going to see a
Yeah.
positive change, which I would love, because I would love to have my hair continue to be healthful, vigorous, and all parts of my youthfulness obviously are things I'm of interest in terms of looking after. So I'm excited to share the results with the audience and with you guys, and we'll certainly check back in at 3 months and 6 months.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned, and this is the last question we'll go into today. You mentioned that there was a number of supporting ingredients in this serum. And I thought you might just pick out a few of those. You don't have to go through all of them if you prefer to
Mhm.
just name a couple. But it's not just the peptide in there. There's some other supporting ingredients. It reminds me of what you guys did with your sunscreen. Could you just tell us about two or three of those and what their benefits are?
Yeah. So mainly we have like together with the peptide is targeting cellular senescence. We have several other like fisetin. We have sunflower extract, ginseng extract, some extracts from different herbs and different botanical sources, natural sources that are very powerful and antioxidants that reduce like the damage caused by UV radiation and other stressors. And we also have prebiotics that is helping to support the scalp microbiome. So it's really a combination of antioxidants, prebiotics, our peptide, and other supporters to give to the hair follicle what they need so the cells can continue growing and producing like strong hair.
Great. And I'd like to just revisit that one more time because I think it'll be new to most people in the audience. This concept of the scalp microbiome. Now, we hear all the time about microbiome. It seems like there's always a new biome to consider. And here's one you're mentioning that I would imagine most of us do not consider our scalp microbiome. There's some results you mentioned in this third party study that you've run. Just tell us a little bit about what characterizes and supports a good scalp microbiome.
Yeah. So mainly like it's the diversity of the bacteria, the component of the bacteria that you have on your scalp microbiome, not only bacteria, but fungi. So there are different species of bacteria. And some of those bacteria, they are already known and even has publication that shows that they promote their metabolites promote hair growth and helps the hair follicle cells. And what we see, and the name of those bacteria is very complicated, so I will not be saying them right now, but we can share and have it written on a blog post or something like that. What we are seeing is this shift of like increasing those good bacteria and decreasing the bad ones. Also, when you have a lot of dandruff or irritated scalp, usually is associated with the increase of some types of fungi on your scalp microbiome, and this was reduced with the use of our product. So it's mainly when you look to this balance of the different species of bacteria and fungi, it's already like known the combination of those bacteria that promotes a healthier scalp versus an unhealthy state. So the data was showing, and it was so nice also to see because the people that analyzed this data, the company that analyzed this data, they came to us and they were very happy to share the results with us because they had already tested other products for hair that does not impact so positively to the scalp microbiome. And this was very exciting for us to hear from them, to see that we're really like shifting the scalp microbiome to a healthy state.
All right, scalp microbiome, a new topic for many and a great one to wrap up on. The product is OS01 Hair. Not only might it help us with hair thinning and loss, it might make us have a healthier scalp in terms of the microbiome. So, Alessandra, very exciting to help spread the word about this new product. I know that hair loss is important to many of us, myself included. I look forward to sharing my own results as well as some of these details from your third party study and to see what the audience experiences when they try it out for themselves.
Yes, I can't wait to hear now that the product is out there. This first month is always the month like, okay, let's hear what people are, how their experience, how the product is working on their scalp. So I'm excited to continue this conversation and to see your results soon.
Great. Thank you, Alessandra, so much for your time, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you.